Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March GreenHomeNYC forum event, Designing for Wellness. My name is Harris Krzmanich. I'm a volunteer for the forum's planning committee for GreenHomeNYC, which is a sustainability nonprofit organization that was founded in 2002. Our mission is to promote a more sustainable built environment. We do this through 3 educational programs, the first being the Green Careers Group, which focuses on promoting the green professional development and providing networking opportunities for graduating students or anyone interested in transitioning to a green career. We have a forums group, which is focused on having panel discussions like this one tonight on topics related to different aspects of sustainability, including energy efficiency, the circular economy, mobility, and renewable energy. And lastly, we have the tours group, which provides opportunities to have a closer look at the various energy efficient buildings and sustainable businesses that we're fortunate enough to have access to in New York City. And of course, all 3 of these programs were in person, but we've transitioned to having all of them virtually. We also have a blog on our website, greenhomenyc.org. So be sure to check that out and also subscribe to our newsletter to get updates and stories on recent legislation, community action, and other initiatives that pertain to our mission. As I mentioned before, we are an all-volunteer organization, so if anyone's interested in volunteering, speaking, writing, or contributing to future events, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at forums@greenhomenyc.org or to myself, harris@greenhomenyc.org. And then before we go any further, I'd also like us to recognize what's happened in Atlanta recently. I truly hope that these senseless, undeniably racist attacks cease and that the community heals quickly. So if we can just take a few moments and observe some silence to honor the memory of the victims of this horrendous Asian hate crime. Okay, so on to tonight's forum. We'll start with presentations, and then afterwards, we'll bring the speakers back up for a Q&A discussion. So in this forum, Designing for Wellness, we'll discuss what companies look for in buildings and how they utilize LEED, Fitwell, and WELL certifications that not only increase sustainability in terms of energy and building materials, but also in terms of well-being and health. The pandemic has brought sort of a renewed interest in these programs. And I think this is important because perhaps some people overestimate the appeal from work from home in the long term. And while I definitely think it plays an important role in the changing office culture and such, having that spatial end to the workday is very valuable. So when hopefully later this year, workers start to return to those office spaces and buildings in general start to become more filled with people, it's good to be knowledgeable about the opportunities that are available for companies to make these spaces safe and welcoming. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers now. Our first speaker is Laurie Rothenberg. She is the Assistant General Counsel at Pfizer, where she leads the legal team responsible for the company's international real estate portfolio. She provides strategic legal advice on workplace solutions and has coordinated the legal aspects of the company's upcoming headquarters move in New York City. Our second speaker is Melanie Cook. Melanie serves on the technical solutions team at the International Well Building Institute. She works to support IWBI's mission by providing technical support to projects teams and leads workshops and presentations to help educate the industry on the well building standard. A third speaker is Emily Bilheimer. Emily is the Fitwell ambassador, an architectural project manager and sustainable design professional with experience working on projects pursuing LEED, WELL, and Fitwell certifications. Our fourth speaker is John Walker. John is a LEED accredited professional, certified sustainable building advisor, Fitwell ambassador, and is the global director of sustainability and wellness at HLW. So with that said, Laurie, your presentation is up first. Maddie, if you want to pull up her presentation. Oh, there we go. All right, Laurie, the stage is yours. You're muted.
Okay, great. Wouldn't be a Zoom without somebody being on mute. So, well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm here to talk about wellness, and we're going to hear about the specifics from the other presenters after this as to why designing for wellness is a good thing for your health, for your buildings. But I think most people are probably here because you have an inkling that it's a good thing. Lots of things are good things, right? So I know eating vegetables is good for me, but I don't always do it. Why should a company with competing priorities invest in wellness, right? Why should they do that in their buildings? I'm here to provide the occupier's perspective on that. Next slide, please.
Sorry, hold on. I don't know why that's not there. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So I'm going to talk about why companies want to design or should design for wellness in order to pick features that resonate with the different employees and the different occupants in your space. I'm also going to talk about how to maximize your impact. So once you decide to design for wellness, how do you choose the features that make the most sense for your company? And then once you implement that, how do you protect your investment throughout the life cycle of your space and your building? To give an introduction on myself, so Harris had introduced me. I'm an Assistant General Counsel at Pfizer, and I work with our real estate and workplace services team to ensure that our colleagues have places to manufacture, to develop, and to bring our different breakthrough therapies to patients. I have a background in general corporate law. I've done M&A, venture capital, and commercial contracting. And now I'm really focused on real estate and the workplace. I'm an advocate for sustainability and healthy building design, dating way back. It was even my college major was a natural resources major. And am now really focused on it, have introduced sustainability initiatives at Pfizer. I'm a lead AP and on the Cornell Sustainability Committee, as well as on the IWBI Community Concept Advisory. Next slide, please. So why design for wellness? There's really been a shift. Pre-COVID, it was harder for businesses to grasp why you would want to design for wellness. It was hard for a budget holder to understand, okay, if I invest a lot of money in this feature or design feature, that it's going to increase employee productivity and then that's going to bring them back money. It was just very, very conceptual and difficult. It was a hard sell. Much easier to say, invest in this energy efficient measure, and then you can see the returns on a utility bill. So the companies that got it had a real competitive edge. The competitive edge was that, okay, yeah, these healthy features, these healthy building features are going to help employee productivity, help employee engagement and focus, and they're going to reduce sickness, employee sickness and absenteeism, and that's going to have a return on investment in terms of dollars, right? So I've seen something, a most recent study that I saw said about $6,500 to $7,500 per person can be the payback from these features. So it was a real competitive advantage. Post-COVID, where we are now, it's a defense move. if you don't have any healthy building features, I think you can't even really be in the game, because employees have been reading about wellness for the last year. They've been looking up at the newspaper and reading about ventilation, exchange rates, cleaning protocol. People are so much more well-versed in wellness right now than they've ever been before. And they're paying attention and looking around at their workplaces and saying, hey, wait a minute, where is it that I work and how safe is it? And that's really where we are now. Next slide. So I've put up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm not a psychologist, I'm a lawyer, but this is really where I think that wellness has gone. So if you look at the bottom level, right, you have your physiological needs. That's the basic reason for having a building. The basic reason is shelter from weather, having a comfortable place to live and to work, right? So yeah, most buildings give that. But then you have the safety needs. And that's where most people are looking. Most people who are saying, I don't want to go back to work yet, are focusing on the safety needs. And we need to be sure that our buildings have the features that can make people feel comfortable to go in. And it's not just safety from a pandemic, it could be from the next hurricane or from the next active shooter, right? There's lots of safety and security concerns that need to be considered in the workplace. Once you have that basis, and that basis is there, and people feel confident and trust their company and trust their building, then they'll go in, and then you can use that as a jumping off point, right? To move up the pyramid to things that help the employees achieve their full potential and become much more engaged, much more productive, and those features that are really going to enhance the human experience. Next slide, please. So which features to focus on? So the basic needs are some of what I've just touched on, and that's really about risk reduction. So it's about reducing the risk of the building, both in the face of, financial risk, whether it be from the resources that are needed to run a building, or from just simply not having a building, right? Because if something happens in the event of a disaster, but it's also operational risk, right? So those two types of risk, and it's increasing the building resiliency. So those two basic needs, those need to be focused on. And then once you have that, you focus on what's your company brand? What are the values of your company that you want your space to reflect, right? So look at your mission, look at the company values, and decide where do you want to have the most healthy building features, which the other presenters will get into more of the details on. Next slide. So this picture is of the Spiral, which is going to be Pfizer's new headquarters in Hudson Yards. We're expected to move in the end of next year. And as you can see from the space, right, there's wraparound terraces where colleagues can go out, they can get they can get some fresh air and connect, interact, collaborate. And that's really what is behind a lot of our design of our new headquarters. We're looking at open space plan where colleagues can interact, right? And that's all about the energizing element that is going to fuel the employee engagement and focus throughout the day. And it's going to lead to, hopefully, our next breakthrough therapy. We are pursuing, I'll just add, we are pursuing LEED Gold and WELL Gold on our space in the building. So once a company decides to go and have WELL building features, how do you protect your investment? Well, from the projects that I've seen, it's really important to eliminate the silos. All of the process is interrelated. So it could be pulling together the site selection team if you're going to a new space. It's the design and the construction. It's the leasing team, and it's operations. Everyone needs to be speaking together because you need to make sure that you have in your space the ability to do what it is that the features that you're hoping to implement will do. So you want to make sure that your landlord is obligated to provide whatever it is you think that you signed up for this building for, and that you have the ability under your lease, if you're in a lease situation, that you have the ability to make the alterations and make the design changes that you think you're allowed to do. You want to be able to do it in a smooth and seamless way. So those are some of the types of considerations on the silos and on the operational and legal framework. Another important thing that I've seen is communicating your design choices. This is really important from both communicating it to management and also to the employees within the company so that people understand, why did you do this, right? Because otherwise we end up back where we were before. People aren't noticing the different elements. You want people to recognize and appreciate so that it continues to be maintained as the healthy building for the years to come and for the length of your design intent. Next slide. COVID, in my view, has really served to accelerate the drive to wellness. It's really opened occupiers' eyes to the impact that a workplace can have and the positive impact that is that the workplace can have. So I mean, it seems from what I'm seeing in the industry that this will continue, and I really hope that it continues because it's really bringing out some really good products that are out there. Next slide. I'd love to hear what other people are seeing in their companies and in your workplaces. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Laurie. That was it was good to get some insight into like what the company's perspective is. And I think that was a really good introduction for the rest of the speakers. Yeah, next speaker coming up is going to be Melanie, and she'll talk about IWBI and the well building certification. So Melanie, you're up. Oh, one other thing too. If you have questions, we're going to do the Q&A. You can write them in the chat too, and we'll get to them. Oh, okay. Let me unmute you. 1 second. Unmute. Did that unmute you? Oh, you're not co-host. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself now, Melanie. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think you should be able to show on full screen if that's helpful.
Yeah.
If not, everyone can just zoom in on their Zoom. But thanks so much for having me on the webcast today. And Laurie, thanks so much. That was really interesting to hear more about what you all are doing and get that perspective of how it looks on the other side and once you're starting to implement some of these programs. So my name is Melanie Cook, and I'm from the International Well Building Institute. I'm on our commercial team, and I really work primarily with our project teams as they're pursuing well certification or working towards the well health safety rating. So I provide technical support, and I also work very closely with specific sectors, our entertainment and sports venues, and our retail and restaurant sectors.
Coming.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know why I can't get this on full screen. I am so
That's
sorry.
totally fine. I can see it in large enough. So if it's okay with everyone else.
Can everyone see this okay? I'm gonna try to do something behind the scenes, but if you guys can see it, great.
We're good.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. You can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll start just by giving a little bit of information about who we are at the International Well Building Institute, or IWBI for short. But we know that it's the spaces around us that can make everyone, everywhere healthier, happier, and more productive. And so that's why we are leading a global movement to transform health and well-being with a people-first approach to buildings, organizations, and communities. And we are doing this primarily through the Well Building Standard. That's the Well certification, results in the Well certification. And essentially the Well Building Standard is a tool. It provides a roadmap for creating and certifying spaces that advance human health and well-being. It was developed over a 10-year process. It's backed by the latest scientific research, and it consists of performance standards, really rigorous performance standards, design interventions, operational protocols, and company-wide practices and policies that are then verified by a third party and result in the certification. The WELL system can work at any scale, so from a single interior space within a building, outwards to the full building, to a full organization, to multiple buildings, and across all different sectors as well, from residential, workplaces, even airports, stadiums, and everything in between. Next slide. So you can think of the Well Building Standard as a tool for advancing people-first places, but really it's the foundation of a much larger ecosystem that builds off of that standard. So within our ecosystem of the Well world, we have these various programs that you're seeing on the screen. So there's a way for organizations to prioritize health across all of their facilities, all of their assets through the portfolio program. There's ways for companies to focus on COVID-19 really specifically in this moment and other acute health safety concerns. That's in the Well Health Safety Rating, which I'll talk a little bit about. And even ways for individuals to get involved and show their expertise in healthy buildings through our accredited professional program, the Well AP. So there's lots of ways to move through the Well journey and really to decide how to make the most impact based on what you or the building or the company are looking for. Next slide. So when we talk about the Well Building Standard, it's made up of hundreds of features or health and well-being strategies, and they're very comprehensive in nature. These are the different categories that they all fit into. So these are the 10 concepts that make up the Well Building Standard. Some of the features are focused on design, others around operations, and about another third are focused on policy. So we look at air and water quality, nourishment, access to healthier foods, or transparency and education around the nutrition of those foods, proper light quality, access to good natural light, opportunities that keep people moving about their day, staying active in the building and outside the building. We look at thermal comfort, acoustic comfort, healthy materials, and lastly, looking at emotional health, mental health in the mind concept, and looking at community support really in the community concept. Next slide. So we like to refer to this current global movement really as the second wave of sustainability, this people and planet narrative. We know that the two are inextricably linked, and that what's good for the health of our planet is good for the health of us as people. And so we certainly incentivize and encourage our projects to take this approach when they are pursuing well. So we have lots of different tools and ways for projects to pursue dual certification. So actually the majority of our projects, many projects are looking at or pursuing LEED certification alongside of WELL certification, or maybe a BREEAM or a Green Star, depending on where they might be in the world. Next slide. And then another really important piece of the WELL certification journey is something that happens towards the close of the project. It's when the on-site verifier actually comes to the project and collects hundreds of data points. So they're looking at, really it's a data-driven environmental assessment. It looks at air and water quality, light attributes, thermal considerations, and tests for acoustic elements as well. And it's the idea that you can design a building to be a healthier space, but without collecting these on-site measurements, without doing this verification, you can't know that it's actually performing as such. So this is a really important piece that all WELL certified projects must go through before they achieve their certification. Next slide. So I'll switch gears a little bit to talk about one of those programs that I mentioned earlier, which is the WELL Health Safety Rating. So as we all know, about a year ago, just over, our world began to pretty rapidly shut down. And so we were actually on the eve of launching the current version of the WELL building standard that was then available, the pilot, out of pilot. We had our governance council ready to vote it out of pilot, but we decided we had to take a pause and really make sure that the WELL building standard was comprehensive enough to address the critical needs of this moment. So we took a pause and we stood up a task force on COVID-19 and other respiratory infections. It grew to be over 600 experts from across various fields. It was co-chaired by a very strong team of experts, including a former Surgeon General to the United States, Dr. Joe Allen, and a number of other experts in their fields. And we held webcasts and conversations and basically lots of listening and learning. And one of the things we heard out of these conversations was really a demand for a designation that would help guide building operators and owners towards best practices in this moment. So really adapting to the needs around COVID-19 and how to get through the reopening or the continued operations of their spaces. So that resulted in the WELL Health Safety Rating, which is an evidence-based third-party verified rating that focuses on these topics you're seeing here: operational policies, maintenance protocols, emergency plans, and stakeholder education and engagement. So it's all documentation based. It is a shorter review period than the larger WELL certification. And essentially it's a subset of features from the WELL certification, the WELL building standard that are most critical in this moment, thinking about COVID-19, but also other acute health and safety related strategies. So if you just go to the next slide, you'll get a flavor for some of those features that are included in the rating. So you can see those topic areas that I just talked about, and I'll just leave this here while I talk over it so you can see some of the features. But you'll see that it goes beyond just cleaning and sanitization. It also looks at having the proper policies in place so that if staff feel sick, they are encouraged to stay home, so that there's time and access to getting flu vaccines, that there's health benefits provided. It looks at the building itself, assessing ventilation, maintaining air treatment systems, looking at air and water quality. So it's addressing COVID-19 and supporting reopening and continued operations around the COVID-19 pandemic, but also other acute health safety concerns. So you'll see food inspection information is another feature in here as well. So we certainly wouldn't want to just think about COVID-19 right now and neglect to think about other acute health safety concerns that could happen in the future. The next slide, please. So achievement of the WELL Health Safety Rating results in a seal, which can be applied to the front door, to the entrance, to reception. And it's really that visible indication that shows that this space has gone through a rigorous third-party verified effort that is science-backed, and that they are doing all that they can to keep health and well-being at the forefront. So it's this seal that can help to communicate to the people who are coming into the space, be it staff, employees, customers, fans, players, whatever the space might be, but really helping to build confidence and trust to be that communication point. And then this slide here is just showing some of the brands that are leading the way, that have enrolled in the Well Health Safety Rating or have achieved the Well Health Safety Rating. So you can see it's really not specific to any one sector. There are a number of sports organizations that have achieved the rating at their venue. You can see the Spurs, the Kings, 76ers, the Yankees in our own backyard, but also across fitness facilities, hospitality, developers. So it's really a wide range of different sectors and industries that are finding value in the Well Health Safety Rating. Next slide, please. And then I'll just show two quick examples that are both fun and in New York. The first is Yankee Stadium, which was the first stadium or first sports facility in the world to achieve the Well Health Safety Rating. So you can see the seal there on their front door. And then the next slide is Empire State Realty Trust. So the Empire State Building is Well Health Safety rated, and across additionally a number of their other buildings as well have enrolled and achieved the rating itself. So their facilities across New York are all rated. So I put information here about where to find out more about the health safety specifically, but it's our website in general. So it takes you to wellcertified.com where you can learn more. And I want to point out too that all of the standards are publicly available. So if you would like to review the health safety rating or the larger, more comprehensive well building standard, it's all publicly available. So you can check out some of the features and dive in even without being attached to an official project. And that's it. So looking forward to some good Q&A later on. Thanks.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Sorry. All right, thank you, Melanie. This is a great presentation. Next, we're going to be going on to Emily Bilheimer. So we'll just get that presentation right up. I could pull it up to Maddie if you're having an issue. Okay, let me try to just. You there, Maddie? Okay.
Sorry, I was just talking to you and I have it up. I'm sorry.
Okay, great.
All good. And can you guys see that?
Yeah, if you want to just do view full screen, that should up at the top. Or if not, you can just get started. It's all good.
Can you guys see this?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I don't know why. I don't know where my full screen went.
No worries. Okay, Emily, stage is yours.
Thanks, Harris, and thanks, Maddie. I'm going to focus on Fitwell, which is another wellness certification system that's also intended to promote health and wellness initiatives for building occupants. So I am a Fitwell ambassador, but I'm also LEED and WELL accredited. So I've actually been recently working on a couple of projects that are doing certifications for, in some cases, LEED and Fitwell, and then in another case, LEED, WELL, and Fitwell. So there is a lot of overlap between the systems, but in this case, I'm going to focus on Fitwell, and I'm going to just do a brief overview of the system itself, and then also the Fitwell response to the current pandemic. So focusing on an understanding of the historical impact of design on human health and how it's contributed to the development of the Fitwell rating system. And then more recently, this introduction of the viral response module to address the impact of COVID-19. So moving on. Okay, so the Center for Active Design, also known as CFAD, is the sole operator of Fitwell and is also responsible for third-party certification. CFAD is an independent nonprofit organization working globally to advance its mission, which is to transform the design and development practice to support health and the optimal quality of life. Next slide. CFAD was launched in 2012 by then New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg to continue the work of an interagency collaboration by promoting evidence-based design strategies that support all aspects of mental, social, and physical health. In addition to Fitwell, CFAD leads programs that impact neighborhoods, housing, research, and advocacy. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to focus a little bit on the built environment and health. And with that background, I'm going to share some historical context to demonstrate the power of design to impact human health, which is all the more relevant today as we address the current pandemic. Back in the late 19th and early 20th century, nearly half of all deaths in the United States were caused by infectious diseases like tuberculosis, pneumonia, gastrointestinal infections. And in response to these epidemics, cities looked at infrastructure and policy development to craft a holistic approach to the prevention of infectious disease. Examples of infrastructure and policy changes in New York alone include the creation of reservoirs to pipe fresh water into the city, creation of the subway system to reduce overcrowding in Lower Manhattan, and creation of the Tenement House Act, which set standards for livable spaces. These building and infrastructure changes had a truly profound impact on the rate of infectious disease, which decreased drastically by 1940. This remarkable drop occurred prior to the widespread availability of antibiotics, which were not widely available until the mid-1940s. However, in the same time, non-infectious diseases, which include chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and asthma, started to surpass infectious disease as the leading cause of death. This is partially because our built environment became more car-centric and opportunities for regular physical activity were largely designed out of our lives. So fast forward to the present day, where on average, 7 out of 10 deaths each year in the United States are attributed to chronic disease. A few of the major factors for chronic disease today include tobacco use, exposure to pollutants, poor diet, and physical inactivity. Today, we've reached a point where physical inactivity is comparable to smoking as a leading cause of preventable death throughout the world. Therefore, Fitwell strives to facilitate the design and construction of built environments that promote physical activity and movement. The pandemic has, of course, redirected our collective concerns back to the prevention of infectious disease, hence driving the creation of the Fitwell Viral Response Module. But first, I would like to address the overall business case for health and wellness in light of the rise of chronic disease in the US. So next slide. So first, the focus on commercial environments, which is office spaces and large-scale buildings. Designers and public occupants are now increasingly aware of the preference for health-promoting environments, demonstrating a strong business case to improve health within the workplace and home. In workplaces specifically related to productivity, employees who have one or more chronic disease conditions are estimated to take 450 million additional days off work each year compared with their healthy coworkers. And absenteeism is estimated to cost employers more than $2,000 per employee, which nationally equates to $153 billion each year. In addition, talent attraction is critical because millennials now make up the majority of our workforce and are more likely to take into account their quality of life, which includes the design of feel and the workplace, when they are selecting an employer. Next slide. So then the focus on residential environments in addition to the workplace. For residential environments, more than ever, people are seeking housing that promotes health and wellness. In a recent survey by the Urban Land Institute, more than half of respondents said they would like to live in a place where they don't have to drive a car often. In that same survey, 38% reported that they didn't have convenient outdoor spaces for physical activity, and a quarter felt that traffic near their homes made it unsafe for them to walk. So these drivers are critical in the development of Fitwell, which is meant to promote activity in all of our built spaces through the introduction of stairs, through the access to shared park space, and also access to public transit. So next slide. The next slide actually just shows a graph of financial drivers. And this shows that prioritizing health in the workplace can significantly increase financial performance. So these are public companies that actually did studies that are listed here below. So you can see the results of the study, which found that stock values for a portfolio of companies that scores high on health and well-being appreciated by 235% compared with the S&P 500 index appreciation of over 159% over a 6-year period. So this just shows as a driver, you know, ESG initiatives are becoming significantly much more prominent in Fortune 500 companies. Even recently at the end of last year with Larry Fink's, who's the CEO of BlackRock, his declaration that health and wellness reporting must become transparent. So there's this big focus on GRES reporting. Okay, next. So Fitwell's vision is a healthier future where every building is enhanced to support well-being. And all of the design and operation strategies within the Fitwell framework are evidence-based, practical solutions that impact occupants and residents' daily routines to promote physical, mental, and social health. Fitwell launched for public use in March 2017, receiving substantial market demand after just 1 year. Next slide. So the creation of Fitwell, it was actually created and pilot tested by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and the U.S. General Services Administration, GSA, which controls all federal buildings. So it's basically, it was a partnership between one of the United States' largest building portfolio owners and scientists at the Center for Disease Control. So it's a science-backed framework, much like WELL. The CDC and GSA piloted Fitwell across a random selection of 89 buildings owned or managed by the GSA, CDC, and also New York City in rural, urban, and suburban contexts across the United States. So these include multiple building typologies from courthouses to traditional office buildings. Next. Fitwell's development took over 5 years, during which time the CDC and GSA reviewed over 5,000 studies to determine the design and operational strategies that would make up Fitwell, along with the points and weighting system associated with each strategy. The Fitwell framework includes over 70 operational and design strategies to achieve the certification. Next slide. And all of these strategies are based on the strongest empirical evidence and are weighted based on priorities for each building use sector. So meaning residential sector buildings weight higher access to park space and access to public transit than, for example, retail spaces. So each strategy relates to at least one health impact category as follows. They're listed here. The impacts surrounding community health, reduction of morbidity and absenteeism that's due to chronic disease, which I mentioned before, and supporting social equity for vulnerable populations, increases physical activity through the use of stairs, through the use of walking, access to parks, activity, and walkability to public spaces, promoting occupant safety, enhancing access to healthy foods, and instilling feelings of well-being. And this has a particular focus on stress, anxiety, and social isolation, which is ever more prominent in our current situation. So recent evidence shows that social isolation has a significant impact on morbidity, similar to that of smoking or obesity. Collectively, these categories address chronic disease at a population level. So moving on. The Fitwell rating system uses a point system to achieve certification, and there are 3 available certification levels, 1, 2, or 3 stars, based on a possible 144 stars. And once again, that is not 144 different strategies. That's based on the weighted approach, the weighted value of each of those strategies. Next. So much like Fitwell was designed so that the vast majority of buildings and development sites can apply Fitwell and benefit from the wealth of public health knowledge behind it, regardless of budget. It's applicable to portfolios, single buildings, and developments, large-scale developments across many typologies. So with a focus on existing or new construction, rehab or renovation, owned or leased spaces, and campuses with either single-story or multi-story buildings. The scorecards are also available for now large-scale community and commercial sites, in addition to just general workplace or single-use tenants, multi-tenant buildings, and multifamily residential and senior housing. And the driver for Fitwell was that it would be accessible in terms of cost to anyone that wants to certify their spaces. So the registration cost is $500, and then the cost for the actual certification process is based on the square footage of the overall project, but it's generally in between like $5,000 and $8,000. So it's really not cost prohibitive for developers or building owners to do. Next slide. Fitwell maintains strong partnerships with other certification and rating systems in the market that are noted here. Some of which were mentioned previously, BREEAM, and RESET is an air certification system. And then GRES, I mentioned that's actually a transparency reporting system on ESG. So moving on to now how this relates to the viral response module. And so just like Fitwell partnered with all of those other organizations to establish the Fitwell standard, it's through partnerships with these leading research organizations and industry advisors that the viral response module was also developed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Just as Fitwell certification applies to building portfolios, the same building owners can obtain a viral response certification by first establishing their entity-wide protocols for approval and then applying those to individual building assets across their portfolio. So they set up basically their protocol and their approach and then apply it to individual buildings based on which ones they foresee as most likely where they want to market this viral response module. Next slide.
Hey, Emily, forgive me.
I'm running out of time.
Roaching your time, maybe just like 30.
I'll just skip over these. So this viral response module is based on 3 sections, focused on enhancing indoor environments, encouraging behavioral change, and building occupant trust. So here you can also see there's the diagram of the aerosolized transmission of the virus shown at the bottom. And if you move on to the next slide, which is focused on the indoor air quality environments, this actually shows the specific strategies that are listed to achieve the viral response under indoor air environment. And then moving on. For behavioral change, it goes without saying that contagious diseases such as respiratory infections are largely spread through direct person-to-person transmission. And the source of the spread for many of these contagions, including influenza, strep throat, meningitis, and COVID-19, are the aerosolized droplets. So shifting human behavior has been essential to decreasing the risk of person-to-person transmission. And the strategies for this behavioral change are noted here, with a focus on surface hygiene stations, access to PPE, supporting hand hygiene, effective signage to promote hand washing and disinfectant, and utilization of hand sanitizers, as well as supporting social groups. And then the last section is building occupant trust, which is really critical. I mentioned earlier that depression and anxiety are a major factor of health and wellness. They are the 1st and 6th leading contributors to global disability, respectively. And so addressing this while in the midst of a pandemic is really critical to building trust of the building occupants. And so this particular section sets up the plan, not only for disease outbreak, but also for communication with the residents of the building to make them feel more at ease. And then finally, the VR response module serves as a natural entry point for advancing full project certification using a Fitwell building scorecard. So the 3 sections that I noted all relate back to these initial drivers. And so building owners can actually certify for the viral response module without certifying for Fitwell, but then if they choose to proceed with a full-on building certification for Fitwell, all of these points pre-certify for the overall building certification as well. So it enables a multi-pronged approach to health and wellness and addresses prevention and mitigation of chronic and infectious diseases. So that's all. And then anyone looking for additional information can check out the Fitwell website where all of this information also lives. Thanks, and sorry for going over.
All good, Emily. That was a really good presentation. So thank you for that. Okay, our last speaker is Johns Walker. Get your presentation up and then take it away, Johns.
Awesome. Thank you, Harris. Super. I don't know how I'm going to follow all these presentations. They're very informative and helpful. And so while this is getting pulled up, just so quickly, so I am the Director of Sustainability and Wellness at HLW. HLW is a global architecture firm. We have offices in London, Stamford, Connecticut, LA, New Jersey, New York. And we sort of have been around for a long time. We're one of the oldest architecture firms in the country since 1885. And we like to joke that one of our first clients was Alexander Graham Bell, actually. So we've been in the game a while. I don't know, it could be bad, but we've been doing this for a while. And you know, we really focus a lot on sustainability and health and wellness in all of our projects. And I'm going to show you some examples of sort of those tenets of that pursuit. And then I'm also going to show a little bit about how that seeps into our projects. So, and I'll do it quickly because I want to get to Q&A because I think there's been some amazing questions come through the chat. So, you know what, I want to try this one more time. If you click the 3 lines next to PowerPoint presentation, what does that do on the left side? I'm just curious on the other side. Yeah, what does that do? Does that do anything? Not really. Okay. Just curious. Okay. So, oh, there we go. Maybe. That's okay. So just high level, if we go to the first slide real quick. So the focus of sustainability and wellness at HLW is sort of 2 cohorts. We do a lot of high building performance, building science around carbon, et cetera. But we also focus a lot on what we've been talking about tonight, which is wellness, well-being, and human performance. And I'm going to focus my conversation on that column of thinking. So if we jump to the next slide, just a quick FAQ, sort of when's the best time to start thinking about this? Our clients ask this all the time, and the answer is as soon as possible. We don't want to be in construction documents and then all of a sudden want to try to think about wellness and well-being. We want to do it early in some sort of kickoff charrette. There's been a lot of talk around, you know, wellness, but then does LEED and Fitwell still have a place in the market? The answer is absolutely. I hope the other speakers have sort of driven this home, is that they complement each other. They are not mutually exclusive. And then what is the future of wellness and well-being? I think, as everyone sort of said tonight, that it is a hyper-focused component. And I want to say that wellness and well-being are not the same things. I think some rating systems, for example, Well Health and Safety focuses a lot on wellness, so flu shots, emergency preparedness plans, et cetera, where well-being is really about biophilic design, mental restoration, space to take a minute to yourself. Those 2 things together make a really amazing space for people to come back to the office to enjoy. So I just want to mention that. So if we go to the next slide, we like to ask these questions on all of our projects, and we sort of like to get the client reaction. So what if the quality of views was taken into account? What does that mean? So we know that good daylight and good views, people like to sit near those spaces. There's a reason why people like to sit near the window. There's a reason why people like to soak in views. And we think that buildings should really highlight this. Now there's a carbon balance between this, right? With highly glazed facades, the maximized views, but also there might be a carbon or energy penalty. So we want to be really smart about how we maximize these views, but it can be done in it, and we're doing it on a lot of our projects right now. So just maximizing those views and ensuring that those views are to something interesting really is important. So a body of water, something stochastic. So if you have a view out to like a vegetated terrace or something like that, that has maybe trees or grasses that move in the wind, that changes over time, that's more interesting. And so we want to think about even those tiny details when we're talking about a view shed of a space. We'll go to the next slide. We also asked the question, and I think that Emily and others have really brought this home, whereas how do we encourage movement in the space? Emily brought up some great statistics about chronic illness, and the reason is because most of the places we design today, we get there, not in New York, but most of the United States, we get there in a car. So we walk out of our garage, we get in a car, we drive, we go to the parking structure, we go to our desk and we sit there all day, and then we do the reverse in the end of the day. We don't move around. So we want to make sure we design spaces that have moments of movement built in. And we do that, especially in New York, with some beautiful stair design. And I know Fitwell focuses a lot on this. And how do we encourage movement and beautiful stairs where the elevator becomes secondary, right? If you can get to, 6 or 7 floors via a stair and promote that and make it really visually beautiful, people will opt for that option, right? So we want to think about that and incorporate active design into spaces that we're building out, especially in places like New York City. let's go to the next slide. We asked the question about what if the walls could breathe instead of close us in? Now, green walls and living walls, I'm always advocating for those, and I recognize there is a expense to this, a first cost. But there are little things that can be done to enhance the biophilic experience that doesn't necessarily mean a massive vegetated wall, right? There's little things. I'm going to show you some project examples of some interventions, some biophilic interventions that we sort of sprinkled into the design that can still get the positive response as something as massive as this green wall. This is a Google project, and I'll show you a little bit more later, but you know, this is sort of the extreme, right? But this idea of connecting to a natural system like a green wall is really important. And then of course, there's these other co-benefits of sound deadening, of, you know, removing volatile organic compounds out of the air quality, things that really matter, especially in times of, you know, communicable diseases like COVID-19. There's a lot of co-benefits to ecology, and I think we're just barely scratching the surface of what that means for spaces inside of buildings. We'll go to the next slide. So I want to park here for just a minute. Biophilic design, I'm sure a lot of you on this call know something about it. And, you know, it's the reason why we like to watch waves crash. It's the reason why we like to sit by, you know, a crackling fire. Those things don't, those attractions don't go away when you live in a hyper-dense place like New York. So we need to think really hard about how we integrate biophilia into our workspaces so that when we return to the office, we can take a deep breath. Because I don't know about you all, but my tiny Brooklyn apartment does not look like this. And to return to an office in a setting that looks like this will be very encouraging to me, you know, and I think a lot of you would agree. So, you know, this is a project that we did that has I'll talk a little bit more about it, but it, you know, it has this moss wall, and a moss wall is easier to maintain because it's basically suspended animation. It doesn't, you can do a system like this that looks beautiful and gorgeous that doesn't have a lot of maintenance costs to it. So if you have a client or you're working with somebody who says biophilic design is very expensive, I would push back on that, because there's a lot of little moments and things that you can integrate that still has a positive impact. Even things like these stairs that are sort of reclaimed wood, that's a reference to a living thing. And that's super important when we're thinking about spaces. So let's jump to the next slide. Around finishes. I didn't hear a lot tonight about materials and finishes and speccing materials and what that means. And I know that Well has really robust components to this, and I know Fitwell does too. But we want to think about what we're putting into our space. When you drive a new car off the lot and you take a deep breath and you think, oh, the new car smells amazing, that's not good. That's volatile organic compounds that you're breathing in. And the same thing happens with our buildings. You can do a LEED Platinum building and you can fill it with some pretty gnarly finishes that off gas over time. That's bad. It's not good. So it's awesome to have a really beautiful biophilic space, but we need to think really hard about the carpets that go in there, the finishes that go in there, the wall coverings that go in there, and make sure that we're not putting things in there that are going to off gas and be harmful. You'd be surprised at how often this gets missed. We need to really focus on this and make sure that we're doing the right thing for indoor air quality. Aside from the MERV filters, I'm glad COVID-19 has sort of brought to light the value of filtration and MERV filters, but you can have the best MERV filter in the world and fill your space with harmful off-gassing materials, and you're not any better for it. So we just need to be careful that we're doing both, right? Let's jump to the next slide. So I just did a quick, I'd love to get some feedback on this very quick diagram and chart about how rating systems compare. And we didn't even talk about Living Building Challenge tonight, which maybe that's for another time. But I just did a quick look at LEED, Well, Fitwell, Living Building Challenge, and Well Health and Safety. And by the way, you know, I'm proud to say HLW is a cornerstone member of IWBI, and we're actually certifying all of our spaces under well health and safety. I think it's a really important rating system. But I just wanted to show this because this is sort of how they line up in terms of building systems, site, community, wellness, well-being, and sort of O&M column. So just sort of a cheat sheet to see how they all stack up. We'll go to the next slide. I'm just going to show, for the sake of time, I want to make sure we get some good questions, just some projects. So this is a project that we did. This is Fidessa. This is in Jersey City. I kind of already talked about it, but you see the sort of the active design element of the central stair, which becomes the default way to move between several floors. You have the green wall as the feature, and then you have these natural finishes in the stairs in the wood. We'll go to the next one. This is UPS. Again, I showed this earlier, but the point is these views, right? I mean, you're not going to get these views everywhere, but when you have them, you need to highlight them and take advantage of them and make sure that you have these moments of prospect and refuge to go outside the building so you can sort of see what's going on beyond the four walls of the space and see leaves change, leaves fall. That's really important from a biophilic design, health, wellness perspective, is being able to see that. So anytime you have that space, you should highlight it and make sure people can see it. Jump to the next one. This is a project that we just completed. Another project in New Jersey, actually. This is Kering. So Kering is a luxury brand company, and they leased space, and actually it was just a warehouse. And of course, with a warehouse, you have a long floor plate, not a lot of good daylight. So we actually punched holes in the roof to let a lot of this natural light spill in. And we built this center stair sort of feature, again, talking about active design, and then sort of this tying in the community experience within the space, so that the center of the building gets great natural light, and it's also the main meeting point of this building. Go to the next slide. This is another shot of Kering. Again, the views, the prospect and refuge, having this view out. Luckily, this project's actually adjacent to a golf course. You have a lot of really nice tall trees that you get the views of. But again, just small moments like the natural wood spaces near the desks and things like that. Those all build in the overall biophilic design story of this building. Jump to the next one. So this is Cognizant. Again, you know, a lot of natural features here, a lot of natural wood. We opted for a moss wall again here, and small ones that sort of lead you down this corridor, low maintenance, but still has that biophilic reaction. And then we also played with some sort of fractal patterns on some of the office spaces and some of the window treatments. Another biophilic design sort of trick. Next one here, again, this is the Google project, but just to say, massive green walls, carpets and textiles that mimic nature. And you notice the chairs even too. I mean, biophilic design is not just put a plant on it. It really has to do with the condition of the space, and even tricks like the high back chairs really offers a little small refuge moment for people who are in this space. It's really important to understand that. And then I think I have just a couple more. I wanted to show this one because I think Well and Fitwell both have credits related to access to fresh and healthy food. And that's really important. You know, when we return to the office, there's probably going to be a little more grab and go kind of things going on versus an island that you go to and you have a lot of food you touch with your hands. But I think we will return to this type of thinking. So just being able to have access to fresh and healthy food is important. And then having the long view shed corridors, and even having vegetated areas outside. So if people want to grab food and take a bite, take it outside and have a meal outside, if you can do that, that's really important to sort of integrate into projects as well, the ability to go outside. And then I think lastly, just as a project that we did in Dublin, this is Willis Towers. We did a a map of the neighborhood and embossed it onto this wood paneling. And then we also translate it to the carpet. So this has to do with, and Fitwell does this really well, which is sort of connection to place. And it's communicated through this sort of abstract map of where this project is located and what this brand believes in. And then of course you layer in the vegetation that you can see outside, and you have like a really nice biophilic space connected to place. I think that's it. Yes. So thanks for the opportunity to share some things, and I'm really looking forward to some good Q&A questions that came through. So thank you.
Great, thank you, John. So that was excellent. Those are really like the apex of office buildings, and if I ever have an office job, I really hope I get to work in a building like that. So those are amazing. Okay, so we do have a couple of Q&A questions. So I'll just kind of throw those out there, and you guys can answer them. The first one is from Cheryl. She was asking about the air quality testing. What type of evaluators are usually used, and what species of mold do they test for? And I think that was around the time of your presentation, Melanie, if you have any specifics on that.
Yeah, I responded in a private message, I guess, to Cheryl,
Oh,
but
okay.
no, but happy to answer out loud too. So basically what I shared was one of the preconditions in the air concept, which is the feature that looks at on-site testing, and it looks at particulate matter, organic gases, inorganic gases, and radon. And then there's specific criteria that needs to be met within. For mold, there's another feature actually that relates to mold, and it's called microbe and mold control. So that looks at UV system maintenance and general inspection. So I sent a link over to that one as well, but hopefully that helps to answer the question.
Oh, great, thank you. And then there was one other one for you. If you could briefly just mention, and I was kind of curious too, like at the Yankee Stadium, what would be some of the features a fan would see as they come in?
Yeah,
Jump out
I know
to you.
that was a good question I saw too. So without being specific to Yankee Stadium, but just generally some of the sports organizations we've been working with and what you might expect to see. It's interesting because it's a little bit more of what you won't see. It's a lot of it is policy and operations based. And that's why that seal is so important, because you likely won't see that they've increased their cleaning frequency, or they're using specific healthier products, or that they are cleaning more frequently in high touch surfaces, or that they've instituted policies around health benefits and sick leave. So and even getting into the ventilation system, these aren't things that people see. And that's why it's so important to have ratings like this, that people can see the seal or the plaque and know this space has gone through this effort. Although I might not see it all upon walking in the space, I can trust that it's gone through that third-party verification. And I think that's more for the health safety seal, health safety rating, because it is policy and protocol based. When you look at Well and Fitwell too, from a more design perspective, of course, there are things that jump out, and biophilia was a great example of that from John's. But yeah, hopefully that helps answer that question.
Thank you. Okay, another question was for Johns from Gall. Is there some research into the advantages and disadvantages of plants, vertical plant wall, et cetera, in indoor spaces? Is this right just for corporate offices, or can this be applied in a more cost-sensitive settings, like say the lobby of a affordable multi-housing building?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot of science around the value of biophilic design, actually going back, there's been a lot of books written about this, a lot of publications. I worked for Terrapin Brett Green for a little bit of time too, several years ago. And when I was there, we wrote the 14 patterns of biophilic design. If you want to really understand the science, that's a really great primer. If you can download it for free on their website. But the science goes back to even studies of people recovering from operations in hospitals. And there's been some science from the 80s actually around recovery times based on your view. So they studied a cohort of people who had a view to like a brick wall, and then they studied a cohort of people who had a view to like nature in a garden, and recovery times were much quicker for the people who had the view to the garden, and their request for, you know, sort of medicine to ease the pain was lessened too. So there's a lot of sort of research and science that goes behind. That's one of the oldest ones actually. Richard Orrick is also involved with that study. So to answer the second part, biophilic design transcends any typology, any setting, any climate zone. It's valuable. So if you walk into a lobby of an affordable housing unit and there is something that creates a biophilic response, incredibly valuable. Where it really matters though is like hospital settings, recovery settings, cancer wards, things like that, where people are dealing with very deep traumatic things, and just have a moment to sit and in a biophilic space is really important for those types of folks. So yeah, it can be applied anywhere. It doesn't matter.
Thank you. Follow up for Johns is, where do you see the future of LEED going? Actually, I was wondering the same thing. We kind of mentioned LEED, but the future of LEED going with other standards such as Fitwell cornering the health and wellness area of the living building challenge, or Passive House focused on the regenerative design and really low energy usage, as well as the material health?
Great question. They all need to exist and they all need to thrive if we're going to figure this out, because LEED, you know, is really holistic. They do, you know, LEED does have some credits around indoor air quality, et cetera, but it's really heavy on water, energy, et cetera. Passive House is really about, you know, building a building that acts like a thermos, right? It stays cold when it needs to stay cold. It stays hot when it needs to stay hot. We need to think, we need all of these tools, quite frankly. And we need to apply them quicker than what we're doing right now. So the future of LEED, I think, is, you know, they sort of launched this LEED Zero, which we didn't talk about tonight, which is really important. Zero carbon, zero energy, zero water. And they just launched it, I think, late 2019, and they amended it, I think, late last year. But I see a place for all of them. And LEED's always going to continue to evolve and up the game. But I think Well came at a really important time. I think Fitwell came at a really important time. So all of them should do well and coexist.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Harris, that because I definitely agree with you, Johns, on that. And as Emily mentioned, that BlackRock's come out as really pushing for companies to go net zero. Pfizer's put out some goals that we're going to go net zero by 2030. And there's so many other companies that are doing that as well. And I think LEED is really instrumental in that. And it's because Well is really focused on the health and the wellness. They overlap, but LEED has the environmental aspects to it. And also when I was talking about the risk reduction, a lot of the resources that get used in a building, the water, the electricity, those are cost exposures for companies coming forward. So as those resources become more constrained in the years to come, the companies that have figured out ways that they're not going to need as much are going to be better off. And I think LEED plays a key role in that.
Okay, let's see, pick another question. This one's for Melanie and Emily, but anyone else could answer too. With standards like Well and Fitwell being great tools to energize the market for healthier buildings, in practice, they're only implemented in a very small percentage of the built environment. So how do you envision this implementation growing by making the tools more popular, or by gradual adoption into building codes and other regulatory vehicles?
I'll answer first. And I think it's a much more holistic approach, kind of like what Johns and Laurie just mentioned. I think we're on the cusp of a large scale movement with the push to go net zero in buildings and in operations. There's going to be a huge push with Fortune 500 companies to do that and report it transparently. And there's also going to be a requirement, I think, New York City already has local law 97, which is focused on decarbonization of buildings. And I think that is going to start to be incorporated into New York City building codes, New York State building codes. California is already there. So New York is not a laggard. They're going to be at the forefront of this movement as well. And I think it's going to be really energized by our incoming administration. I think it's also critical. Someone had asked about Fitwell's relationship to GSA, and currently all GSA federal buildings are not required to be certified. But, with Biden's push for energy efficiency and to meet our requirements, our ambitions for carbon reduction, buildings are going to be a huge portion of that. And I see, future executive orders related to that, if not, just private sector action. So it has to be a combination of everything.
Cool, great answer, thank you. Another question just popped up. And I actually think it's a really good question, even though they thought it might have been silly. The question is, if a building is LEED certified, does it mean that the companies in the building are automatically LEED certified? And I think, Fitwell, or it doesn't just have to be LEED, but yeah, shaking your head, Emily. If the whole building is...
Yeah, the answer is no.
Yeah, okay.
So I mentioned that I've been doing a couple of projects. They're all core and shell projects, which is just the building itself and not the tenants. But if the building itself is certified in any one of these frameworks, then it basically sets the stage for then the tenants and the occupants to have an easier ability to achieve the same certifications. And landlords can put into their building standards, advocacy that tenants are compliant, but it's going to be upon the tenant to achieve those certifications.
Okay.
Yeah, there's different like LEED sections. So there's like building design and construction, right? There's core and shell, there's operations and maintenance, there's, interior design and construction. So those are all like sort of filters of LEED, and you can slice and dice that however you want on buildings. So there's all the sorts of parameters per style of LEED.
Okay, I got one more. It's a kind of a specific question, but I'll read it anyway. While working on documentation for a Fitwell project recently, I realized that there are newer rating systems that don't have a user database yet. That have a user database yet that has a guidance and advice on how to accomplish each credit requirement. E.g., there's a LEED user for LEED projects. How do you interpret some of the credit requirements or seamlessly navigate the documentation process for the rating systems? Are there resources out there that you can refer or recommend?
I guess that's to me, right?
I'm not sure.
I can answer for well, but not for Fitwell. So I'll pass that one to Emily.
I'm not sure which particular documentation you're referencing, because when the spreadsheets come out, they actually come out with user guidance as well. But all I can say is, if you have particular questions, I mean, you can put in the chat which one you're referencing. I know that there was the newer senior assisted living that came out in the fall. But you can also reach out to the Center for Active Design, and they'll respond with clarifications. But I know that when they issue the spreadsheets, when they upload the spreadsheets, they're also including the guidance. So maybe look around on the website, but they'll also respond.
Great, thank you. Okay, so it's approaching 8. I'm just gonna make a quick announcement, and then if the speakers can stay around and chat with some of the attendees, that's great. I understand if there's places you need to be though. So I'll just get to my conclusion. So yeah, with the last coming minutes of this forum, I just want to make an announcement that our next forum is going to be April 21st. And it's on the topic of how COVID-19 has impacted energy usage patterns. And again, as I mentioned before, please consider following us on social media platforms and to read our blog. Also follow us on YouTube. We have all of these recordings on there, and I will be sending out an email with a link to the recording for this forum. So keep your eye out for that. So thank you so much for joining us. I really hope you enjoyed it. And we'll catch you at the next event. And I'll just kind of allow everyone to unmute themselves and chat. But again, if you guys want to just have a closing remark, and if you need to take off, that's, it's totally okay.
No, it's awesome. I can stick around for a couple of minutes. I really appreciate GreenHomeNYC for hosting this really awesome conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much. I can stick around for a couple minutes also.
Okay, cool.
I can as well. Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you everyone for attending.
So can I ask a question? This is sort of a chat. It's a little bit of an obnoxious question, so I didn't want to say it before. But one of my concerns or living in the city is that a lot of large commercial buildings, some of which are LEED, some of which have different, some of your ratings, they talk about community, but people go pre-COVID, they went in the buildings for 12 hours and they ate there and they took care of all their needs there and then they left. So even though we all believe in community, I think the trend, unfortunately, for the larger commercial buildings is to keep everybody in, or at least it was, to keep everybody inside, and that's not really community connected. So has anybody dealt with that issue?
We are actually are very involved with the Hudson Guild for when we move. So we are taking that community approach to heart and getting really involved in the local community as well. So a lot of the buildings are offering, I know Tishman Spire has something, and we're building something as well within the company to have relationships with the local eateries and things like that, to encourage colleagues and to, frequent the whether it be a restaurant or a bar or whatever, in the local area of the building.
Thank you. I thought my video was on. I think it's key to ask a question, not have my face. Anyway, thank you.
Okay.
Take your step.
John, actually, in your presentation, you mentioned the living building challenge, and that's a well thing, right? So I was wondering if you or Melanie maybe wanted to just touch on that real quick and speak to the relevance.
Sure. Yeah. So Living Building Challenge is another rating system, and it's the most, not trying to, I have no dogs in this fight. I'm just saying Living Building Challenge is the most progressive rating system that exists. It's called Challenge for a reason, and there's not very many projects that are fully certified. So, it'd be really, really hard to do a full Living Building Challenge certified building in New York City because of some of the requirements. Etsy headquarters in Brooklyn is, I can't remember, someone can tell me if it's close. I can't remember exactly what pedals they got, but it's really hard to do in New York. But that being said, it's important it's an important framework, super critical. And they, net zero carbon, net zero energy, net zero water, that is part of their full certification framework.
And to add to that, what makes the Living Building Challenge, I think, so appealing, John's mentioned it, but is that it goes beyond code. It considers building to code as baseline, and then it considers net zero as good. But it actually, the goal is to leave the environment more positive than the space that when it came. So basically making a building that gives back. So whether it's not only net zero, but giving back to the grid and creating spaces that are enhancing not only the occupants, but the community as well. So it just goes that one step further to, you know, not only improve the built environment and the occupants' lives, but all of the surrounding area. So
Yeah, sorry, Emily, you're right. It's net positive, not net zero.
net
You're right.
positive, yes.
Yeah, regenerative
Yeah.
design. Yeah.
Yes. Design, not build back better, but design even better, greater. I don't know. I'm making up terms here at the end of the night.
Totally. And this was a question I had asked. I forwarded you guys, but I think it is a really good question. Katie asked it. Where'd it go? About the, well, I'll just ask it. What changes, design, operations, maintenance that are a result of the COVID-19 pandemic do you think are temporary versus permanent? What percentage of these things that we're doing are going to be returned to business as usual once the pandemic is over? Or are there a lot of measures that are actually going to become part of the basis of design going forward? I would hope a lot of it's here to stay, but it'd be interesting to see if some of them are just kind of temporary.
I can jump in. Melanie, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, my personal opinion is it's here to stay. I think that already the big movers in the space and the early adopters were on board with this years ago. And now it's no longer just a nice to have, it's a must have. Employees and residents and all of us, we are so educated now as a general public about the importance that our buildings play in health and well-being. And I think that isn't something that's going to go away even when it's safe to be back into all of our buildings in a post-COVID world. So I think it's here to stay.
I agree with that. I think especially all of the changes associated with air quality, there's no need to go backwards. So improved air quality is here to stay. I mentioned specifically in Fitwell some of those social distancing methods, which, you know, hopefully we're not social distancing indefinitely. But I think now setting up those protocols, much like the pandemic playbook, if you will, this isn't going to be our first and last pandemic. So, you know, having all those protocols in place will remain, and I think they'll just continue to be evolved as we have more collective and social awareness moving forward.
Yeah, and I read a thing today that Bill Browning wrote, who of course founded Terrapin Bright Green, and he was like, you know, we're moving away from an interest in beanbags and ping pong tables, and now it's MERV filters and biophilia. Like that's where we're going, and that's where we're heading. So it's good.
Cool. Okay, I got one last question, and then we'll just wrap it up. It's kind of a broad question for John or Emily, but I think definitely it's for everyone. What standards do you see the clients being interested in the most? Like what jumps out? What's the first standard that clients ask for?
For me, it's LEED. And then from a marketing perspective, like I mentioned, I've been working with developers who want to do the dual certification, and Fitwell is more easily accessible in terms of cost and lesser degrees of, you know, building interventions. But as I mentioned, there's one developer that is pursuing LEED, Fitwell, and WELL. So I think they're looking at all of the certifications in order to enhance their positioning in the marketplace as they pursue future tenants.
I have a question on top of that, actually, maybe for Johnson, Emily, because sometimes we'll design a space, but we won't necessarily pursue the certification. And I understand that a lot of companies will also consider that, right? Because it depends, if it, particularly when we were looking mostly at LEED before Well and Fitwell were developed. Do you see clients still doing that? Or does everybody that's doing it go for the certification?
I can jump in, sure. So, this may be bad to say on this call, but I don't really care about, I want the building to be as best as it can be and has little impact as possible on the environment and best for people. Whether or not we use a tool like LEED, Fitwell, Well, that's amazing. That's great, because that is a framework. It's a third-party verified framework, which has a lot of value. So sorry, I hate to say this, but the answer is it depends. I have a lot of conversation where clients are like, we're going to do a LEED-like building, and then you get to the end of CDs and it's like a code building because they don't have a third-party verifier to hold their feet to the fire, right? It's harder to get them to do it. So it just depends. But I would say, to back up Emily's point too, I would say the last 5 projects that we are working on have this like magic trifecta of LEED, Fitwell, and well health safety. We're actually not doing well on them. We're doing well health safety because Fitwell and well are like a Fitwell and well health safety are sort of a lower, easier to get those through. But I think a lot of our projects are doing all 3 of those right now. It's sort of interesting. I don't know if you feel the same, Emily, but yeah.
All right, great. I think that's pretty much answered all the questions. So we'll wrap it up now. Thank you again so much, the 4 of you, for coming. This was a wonderful event, and we hope to see everyone again in April at our next forum. So thank you all.
Thanks, Harris. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Everyone.
See you later.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Harris. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
everybody.